we do want to welcome our guests, and we thank you all for coming, but we also want to welcome Trevor Loudon to come and speak to us at this time.
Thank you very much, Mark. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
I have a little bit of a cold, so it may falter sometimes, and I have a southern accent, which you may have to look, I want to say I'm honoured to be in the congressional district that got rid of Eric Cantor and gave That was a huge achievement, folks. That spurred the whole movement, that encouraged the whole movement right across the country. You cannot believe the impact that race had, way beyond your borders. I was just overjoyed for days after that. Seriously, so I'm very grateful to you. Now, Reagan said you should always start with a funny story, so I'll say one. I was in Los Angeles recently, and I bought some fruit from a street vendor, and he said to me, "Hey, you've got an accent. Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, I'm from New Zealand." He said, "Well, where's that?" And I said, "Well, it's down by Australia." He said, "Oh, where Arnold Schwarzenegger comes from." So that's Common Core geography, folks. Look, I've been touring all around your country for 3 years now. Your government gives me a 90-day visa to visit your country, but I'm very tempted to stay for 91 days, because apparently I'll get a free cell phone. What a great country. But look seriously, folks. People always say to me, why do I come to America? Why do I care? I say there's two reasons. The first is gratitude. You know, my country was saved in World War II from invasion by the Japanese by the huge sacrifice of your fathers and grandfathers and uncles at the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway. We understand what it's like to face invasion and be saved by an ally. Now, if you look at this world today, folks, what do you think America's allies think of you today? You saw what Mr. Obama and the Democrats did to Bibi Netanyahu. Totally disrespected him, your most loyal ally. So if they're going to disrespect Israel, if they're going to do a deal with Iran that could lead to the destruction of Israel, why do you think any of your other allies would trust this country? You know, your allies are looking at you. They look at one of the first things that Obama did when he came to office. He cancelled the missile shield that was going to protect Czechoslovakia and Poland from the Russians. Then he abandoned Georgia to the Russians. Then he tried to turn Egypt over to the Muslim Brotherhood. And now they're looking at the Ukraine, folks. The Ukraine has a treaty signed in your Senate under Bill Clinton guaranteeing that country US military protection in the event of Russian military aggression. They gave up their nuclear arsenal in exchange for an American promise. And now that they need it, folks, where is it? Obama has done a few things. He's sent them a few $100 million of non-lethal aid. He gave $2 billion to India recently for Agenda 21 smart cities. But he has sent them John Kerry. Who is John Kerry, folks? He's basically Jane Fonda with less testosterone. But he has put some sanctions on those Russians to terrify them. I saw yeah, I laughed too. I saw a rally in downtown Moscow recently. A woman held up a signpost, a placard. She was pro-Putin. It expressed beautifully the Russians' fear of the United States. The sign said, "Your pornography is harder than your sanctions." So if you look at the world today, you have got Russia clearly bent on establishing its empire in the East and in Eastern Europe, maybe Western Europe. Just this is a prediction. You may well see revolutions breaking out in Europe this year, like they did in North Africa, instigated by the Russians. You have China building a big blue water navy in the Pacific. You have Iran clearly intent on destroying Israel, and your president is building an alliance with them. And you have ISIS going crazy in the Middle East, committing all sorts of atrocities. Thousands of people are dying every day, folks, because this country twice elected an anti-American president. Would this be happening today if you had a Reagan in the White House? But Obama has abandoned Reagan's doctrine of peace through strength. And if you lose your strength, folks, what happens to your peace? What is happening now? People are dying because of the last two American presidential elections, folks. And a whole lot more may die yet. So this is a responsibility that American voters carry. What about those 20 million evangelical Christians who didn't vote last year? Didn't even register because politics is too dirty, right? Go back to Germany, 1930s. The German churches had the power to stop Hitler. They had the voting power and the strength to stop Hitler, but they didn't want to get involved. So 6 million Jews died, and millions of your countrymen were put at risk because of that. Hundreds of thousands of your people died because of that. So what do you say to those 20 million Christians now who complain about what's happening to their brothers in the Middle East and North Africa? How many of them understand that that's happening because they didn't vote? They had the power to stop that, folks, and they didn't. Shame on them. So people, this is not about a depression. You're Americans, and you'll stand up and fight against the depression. You'll fight your way out of depression. This is not even about losing some of your rights, because you're Americans and you'll stand up and take them back. But have you ever been in a position before where your commander-in-chief is alienating your allies, empowering your enemies, and gutting your military? What is the inevitable consequence of that, people? You know, Obama's cut whole chunks out of the army. He wants to cut the Navy back to pre-World War II levels. He's purging officers he doesn't like. He's driving thousands more out of the military with the gay policy, women in combat, and rock-bottom morale. Your nuclear deterrent is hardly effective. It is no longer maintained. The Russians are way ahead of you now, both in conventional and nuclear forces. But they would never use that against you, would they? Because Hillary's made them your friend, right? So this is serious, folks. This is not about, you know, the old Republican-Democrat game. This is about the survival of America and the survival of the Western world. Because if America goes down, we all go down, folks. There ain't nowhere to hide, because if there was, I would be there. Seriously. So this is something we all have to confront. You look at Obama, and it's not just Obama, but you look at Obama, trained by pro-Soviet Marxists like Frank Marshall Davis as a young man, Alice Palmer, almost certainly a Soviet agent, Alice Palmer in Chicago, the woman who got him his first job in politics, definitely a Soviet agent. Their agenda was always to destroy the United States military, because they knew if they could take down your military, their friends in Russia and China would rule this planet. What do you think they would think of Mr. Obama today, folks? Do you think they'd be proud of him? People, if Mr. Obama was just stupid or incompetent, would he not make some mistakes in your favour occasionally? But if he was a Marxist, put in place to gut your military, destroy your economy, and destroy your national sovereignty, does his behaviour make more sense? If Obama was a fully paid up Russian agent here to destroy this country, what would he be doing differently than he is today? I think the most significant thing Obama said in his entire first term of office when he was caught off mic in South Korea with then Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Yes, Mr. Medvedev, when I get re-elected, I'll have more flexibility to deal with you. Yes, said Medvedev, I understand. I will pass your message on to Vladimir. We are with you. What more of a warning do you need, guys? Sometimes these miraculous little sound bites are seen as warnings. Now my books, I have both of my books there. The first one is Barack Obama and the Enemies Within, nearly 700 pages on Obama's Marxist, communist, anti-American ties. Now that book is really, really heavy, folks. And I got sick of lugging it around the country. And I vowed and declared that my next book would be smaller and lighter. This one is The Enemies Within, Communists, Socialists and Progressives in the U.S. Congress. And guess what, guys? It's bigger. Because those commies just kept on coming, folks. The deeper I dug, the more I found. That book profiles 51 members of the House and 14 senators with ties to some of the most hardcore anti-American groups in this country. Some of them with foreign overseas ties. Now the book is really about the two big secrets of modern communism. The first secret, I think they borrowed from the devil. I think, the cleverest thing the devil ever did was to convince people he doesn't exist. And what have the communists been telling you in the last 20 years, folks? Don't exist, we're no longer a threat. Well, you can trust them about as much as you can trust the devil, folks. The second big secret of modern communism, which is hardly ever discussed, and there are thousands of books on the subject, it is the ability of a tiny Marxist-Leninist party, maybe only a few hundred comrades strong. It is their ability to influence and even control the legislative process in their country. In other words, to write the laws. What I'm saying is, less than 20,000 card-carrying communists in your country are writing the laws that control the lives of more than 300 million Americans today. Not 50 years ago, today. Now the mechanism they use is control of the labour unions. Now look, you are very... Sorry about this raspy voice, guys. It's getting better. You were very lucky in this country for a long time because your AFL-CIO, your unions, were controlled by hardcore anti-communists like Lane Kirkland and George Meany. They kept the Reds at bay, folks. But in 1995, everything changed. That was the year that Democratic Socialists of America, a Gramsciist communist group, that was the year they took over the AFL-CIO. They installed their man, John Sweeney, as president, and now their protege, Richard Trumka, runs it for them. They took over every single major labour union in the country, and then they purged the Democratic Party of the people they did not like. All the Southern Conservatives, the moderates, the Dixiecrats. Joe Lieberman, the senator from Connecticut, was the last one to go. Now they own that party, folks. They own it lock, stock and barrel. So 20,000 communists control the unions, and the unions control the Democrat Party. So the process is very simple. The communists set a policy. It might be socialisation of student loans, green jobs, cap and trade, card check, Obamacare, normalisation of relations with Cuba, a New START treaty with Russia. They set a policy, they make it union policy, and the unions make it Democrat policy. There's not a policy in today's Democratic Party that can be distinguished from the policies of the Communist Party USA and Democratic Socialists of America. They are identical. Now I want to give a real example of this, and this should resonate in this area because Dave Bratt fought a lot of his battle over this issue. Comprehensive immigration reform, otherwise known as amnesty. Now you have Republicans, people, and I put that in inverted commas, who tell you this is great for the GOP. Because if you give 11 or 12 or 20 million illegals citizenship and voting rights, they're all going to be so grateful they'll all become staunch Republicans, right? Just delusional. We know that they are socially conservative, many of them. The Latinos, who are the bulk of the illegals, vote overwhelmingly Democrat. And they may change in 20, 30 years, which is what the Republican Party's counting on. We don't have 20 or 30 years, folks, because if the Democrats win in 2016, they do not ever intend to give up power, ever. So, why do these Republicans tell you this garbage, folks? Could it be connected in any way to the fact that the US Chamber of Commerce has spent more than $1.7 billion promoting amnesty in the last 10 years? What do you think the Chamber wants out of it, guys? Is it hard to figure out? Cheap labour. And I'm all for making profits, folks. I'm all for business. But I believe that when you're in business, you should wear the costs of your business. You take the profits, you wear the costs. So the Chamber wants profits, but that is going to come at the expense of your border integrity, your national security, and the rule of law in your land. How many people are going to die because of the open border policy and the terrorists that are coming up to your country right now? So the Chamber of Commerce is going to make the profits, but you are going to wear the costs. Is that fair? Now, but the real driver of this, the real driver of this is the hard left, the communists. This started out in California in the 1950s with a Communist Party member named Bert Corona, a hardcore Stalinist. He also set up the Viva Kennedy clubs, the first organised effort to bring Latinos into the Democratic Party. He set up, mainly with Catholic Church money, a whole bunch of support groups for illegal immigrants across the Southwest and Southern California. The purpose of these groups was to encourage illegals across the border, get them work in factories and farms, get them citizenship and voting. The voting was the goal, folks. Now, Corona trained a whole bunch of disciples to carry on his work. 3 of them are very active today in Southern California. They work closely together and they've transformed that state. The first one is Antonio Villagrosa, until recently the mayor of Los Angeles. A hardcore Marxist, he used to go down to Cuba to cut sugarcane for the Castro brothers. He turned Los Angeles into a sanctuary city. He forbade the LAPD from enforcing immigration laws, and the illegals flooded in the hundreds of thousands. Changed the entire demographics of the county. Second member of this group, Gil Cedillo, a Communist Party supporter, until recently the Democratic head of the California State Senate. He is the man who got the DREAM Act pushed through in California about 3 years ago, which gave all sorts of so-called rights to the children of undocumented workers. Undocumented workers. That's what they call them. Invaders, illegal invaders would be more accurate. The third member of this group, another Marxist, the most powerful woman in California, in my opinion, Maria Elena Durazo, the head of the California AFL-CIO. She is behind the massive union-driven and union-paid-for Latino voter registration drives and get-out-the-vote efforts that have added hundreds of thousands of new Latino voters to the California rolls in the last 15 years, almost all of them Democrats. The result of this deliberate program has been to turn California from a reddish-purplish state to solidly blue. And that counts when it comes to electing a president, folks, because the Electoral College votes of California, your most popular state, now go exclusively to the Democrats. But the leader of the movement today is a man called Eliseo Medina. I guarantee you've seen him on TV wearing a purple shirt leading an amnesty rally. He is a card-carrying member of Democratic Socialists of America. He supports the Communist Party, former member of Obama's Latino Advisory Committee, worked very closely with Luis Gutierrez, the rep from Illinois, the Democrat who was trying to drive amnesty through the House. Gutierrez is a former member of the Puerto Rican Socialist Party, a pro-Cuban Marxist-Leninist outfit. He also consults very closely with Mr. Obama. It was basically Medina that got the amnesty bill pushed through the Senate. And when it failed to go through the House, he pressured Obama to do executive amnesty. Medina did it, folks. Now I want to ask you a question. Anybody in this room, not counting military, has ever applied for a federal government job who is willing to admit it? Okay? Some of them are very legitimate. Okay, well, is it true that for a lot of federal government jobs, you need an FBI security check? And is it true they can be pretty thorough? They can go through your underwear drawers practically. Check out your family background, overseas travel, dodgy relatives, political affiliations, drug habits. Not saying you have them, but all these things. That's true, isn't it? Okay, so why do they do that? Because this country has enemies who will exploit your weak and dishonest against you. You're in the federal government, the heart of the free world, folks. You might have the president be guarding the president someday. You might be guarding a nuclear facility. You might have state secrets under your control. They need to trust you. But what if you're a young Marxist radical like Raul Grijalva, Jan Schakowsky, Jerry Nadler, Rosa DeLauro, Tammy Baldwin, Patty Murray, Barbara Lee, Maxine Waters, Eddie Bernice Johnson, who hangs around with the local communists, who control the local unions and control the local Democratic Party, and they have the ability to elect you to Congress or even the Senate. There you may serve on the Science and Technology Committee, the Judiciary Committee, the Armed Services Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, even the Intelligence Committee, as Andre Carson, who has connections to the Muslim Brotherhood and the Communist movement, was just placed by Nancy Pelosi. There you can have access to all sorts of government secrets at the highest levels and the ability to influence public policy, not just on a national level, but an international level. How much of an FBI security check does that one take, guys? Nothing. Because the people are supposed to vet the candidates, right? And the media is supposed to help you do it, right? How's that working out, guys? Look, they did it with Mitt Romney and Sarah Palin. It was a question of character. You had a right to know everything about them because they might lead your country someday. You had a right to know everything in Sarah Palin's kids' Facebook pages. You had a right to know about what Mitt Romney did with his dog on holiday. about allegedly beating up some young gay kid when he was 17. So why do you not have a right to know about the elephant's graveyard of skeletons in Obama's closet? Or Nancy Pelosi's? Why does having a D after your name make you automatically a safe and honest person? I would have thought quite the opposite. Now, if you were a foreign intelligence officer up in the United Nations in New York, which has hundreds of them, and you had, say, from Cuba or Nicaragua or Venezuela or Iran or China or Russia, North Korea, and you had networks in the communist parties and the labour movement of this country who had the ability to elect their friends and secret members into your Congress, where they could get you any information they wanted and steer public policy in your direction, do you think they would be so stupid and lazy that they would not take advantage of that opportunity? People, these are the most powerful and influential legislators in the free world. America is the #1 target of all of your enemies. You've got 400, how many congressmen and 100 senators with no security checks. Do you seriously think your enemies do not exploit that? People, if they don't do their job, they might not go home to a fat pension. They might go home to the gulag. It's a plum, it's just waiting to be exploited, and you let them do it every day, folks. I quoted my book, Raul Castro, the leader of Cuba, boasts and openly boasts how members of your Congressional Black Caucus, which was set up by communists, go down to Cuba on a regular basis to talk to the Castro brothers how they're going to ease work in your Congress to ease trade and travel restrictions on Cuba. So that country can send more spies and more terrorists and more drugs to your country. And now they've done it, folks, because Obama has done it for them. What do you call it when someone goes from your country to an enemy foreign country to help them against you? Treason. What's the penalty for that, folks? Yeah. So why is it happening every day and nobody says boo?
That's right.
It's been going on for a while too. Any Vietnam veterans in the room tonight? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thanks for your service. Well, I want to ask you a question of you gentlemen. Was the Vietnam War lost in the jungles of Vietnam? No. Always get the same answer. Is it true that you had a lot of very tough rules of engagement on you? You couldn't chase the enemy to certain places, you couldn't bomb certain harbours, you couldn't chase the enemy across borders, you couldn't hold territory, you had to retreat and allow the enemy to re-infiltrate. Is any of that true? Yes. Now here's a really stupid question. Did that hamper your ability to fight and win that war? Just a little, right? So it is also true that when you withdrew, your Congress defunded the South Vietnamese military and basically guaranteed a communist victory. Okay, that's true. So you lost 58,000 of your fellow countrymen in that war. Your classmates, your fellow soldiers, your fellow, airmen. I guarantee everybody in this room was touched by the Vietnam War. And what about the hundreds of thousands who were damaged by it? What about the millions of Vietnamese who suffered from a communist takeover? Execution, torture, imprisonment. 58,000 of your countrymen died in a war, and this is true. Had you been allowed to fight that war to win, like you were in World War II, to take it to the heart of the enemy, could you have won it, and won it pretty damn quickly? Yes. So, therefore, a lot of your countrymen died completely unnecessarily. And it's my contention that members of your Congress, like Father Drinan from Massachusetts, were deliberately working with the Communist Party USA to sabotage your war effort. And the Communist Party USA was taking its orders from the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which was allied to the Communist Party of North Vietnam. Do you think there might have been a little bit of treason going on there, guys? And how many of those congressmen who sold your brothers down the river, how many of them paid a single penalty for what they did, folks? One of them is now Secretary of State. And John Conyers is still in Congress. How long's he been there, folks? 140, 160 years? Look, John Conyers headed the Judiciary Committee for many years, still serves on it. The Judiciary Committee is one of the most powerful bodies in your Congress, the body that writes federal tax law. But it also has another important role. It oversees the Federal Bureau of Investigation and grants its budget. So what is the role of the FBI when it comes to rooting out traitors in your government, folks? It's supposed to be doing it, is it not? That's their job. 50-year history of the communist movement, member of 2 Soviet fronts that I know about, and invited Fidel Castro to Harlem in 1995 for a big love fest. You think Charlie Rangel is ever going to support tax reform for you guys? What about Rosa DeLauro, one of your top Democrats? Pictures in my book, Nancy Pelosi's best friend, pictures in my book of her hugging her best friend, Joel Fishman, the head of the Connecticut Communist Party, in the headquarters of the Connecticut Communist Party, where Rosa DeLauro has an office. Joel Fishman, the daughter-in-law of Soviet spy Victor Perlo, is the communist delegated by the party to work with the Democrats to elect as many left-wingers into your Congress and Senate as they can. That's her role. What about Tammy Baldwin, the senator from Connecticut, senator from Wisconsin, long-time member of the Colombian Support Network? That group supports the FARC, Marxist-Leninist terrorists in Colombia. They're known as narco-terrorists because they fund their revolution by selling cocaine to your young people and some of your older ones, right? Tammy Baldwin, and that organisation is supported by the Communist Party USA, by Bernadine Dawn, for instance, who some of you may have heard of. Howard Zinn, the communist historian who wrote his People's History of America, which your kids have to suffer through. So, Tammy Baldwin has used her position in your Congress on several occasions to try and get US military aid cut off to the Colombian government so they can do to Colombia what they did to South Vietnam. And if she succeeds and Colombia falls to the Marxist-Leninists, they will send even more cocaine to your country. And what about Judy Chu, folks? One of the top Democratic congresswomen from California. Looks like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, softly spoken, beautiful suits. On Obama's re-election committee, head of the Progressive Caucus, head of the Asia Pacific Caucus in your Congress. She goes to China all the time to build business ties between China and California. Tells the Chinese press, "I'm coming home." The Chinese press describes her as China's representative in your Congress. Greensboro, North Carolina, folks, not far from here. 1979, the Communist Workers' Party, a hardcore nutcase pro-Chinese communist group, got in a street gun battle in broad daylight with the Ku Klux Klan. Automatic weapons were used and 5 people died. The Greensboro Massacre. You look it up. Pretty extreme, don't you think? Judy Chu used to head one of the Communist Workers' Party's main front groups for years. She still works with at least 5 former leaders of the Communist Workers' Party right now. One of them inspired her to set up the Asia Pacific Caucus in your Congress. one of the most powerful bodies in your Congress. People, you've got at least 100 members of your House and 20 members of your Senate who would not pass an FBI security clearance to clean the toilets at any military base in your country. And neither would your president. Could that be an issue? But I don't want to depress you people with any of that. Or bring you down in any way. Am I a bit late? Sorry, don't look down now, please. I wouldn't be responsible for what you might want to do. Look, this is how I see it, people. If I thought there was no hope for America, I'd be back in my beautiful New Zealand right now, building bunkers and stocking up on baked beans. And I'm not mocking prepping, believe me. But this is how I see it, folks. 2008, the left had a slam dunk. They had the House, they had the Senate, and they had their man in the White House. 40 years of hardcore infiltration by those 60s radicals through the Democratic Party, the unions, the media, the universities. 40 years of hard work finally came together. They finally had all of their ducks in a row. And they were going to take you down, folks. They were going to have the revolution that you stopped them from having in the 60s. And they had it in the bag, folks. Who was going to stop them? John Boehner? But in 2009 and 2010, something miraculous happened. And I do not use that word lightly. What do you think that might be, guys? You guys happened. Where were you, people? I didn't see you coming. The left didn't see you coming. You took us all by surprise, and thank God that you did. Because you blogged and you marched and you emailed and you rallied and you agitated and you put some spine into the GOP. And you guys and Glenn Beck basically took back the House in 2010. That brought the agenda of the left to a grinding, screeching halt. They had it in the bag, folks. They were breaking out the vodka. And a bunch of amateurs and novices came out of nowhere and took their toys away. And some of you wonder why they hate you. Why do they call us dirty names? What have we ever done to them? You have done so much, folks. In 2008, Obama could walk on water. Yet 2 years later, thanks to you, he lost the House in a landslide. Thanks to you and you alone, folks. That brought the agenda to of the left. Stopped it, people. I say this straight up. The Tea Party saved America. Because if you think about it, folks, had you not done what you did, Obamacare would have been locked straight in, card check, cap and trade, green jobs, the whole lot of the scam list would have gone straight through, and they would have had amnesty in the first or second year. And 10, 12, 20 million illegals would have been voting in 2012 and 2014 and 2016. And where would you be then, guys? I just want to backtrack because I missed out a little bit. I'll go back to Aliseo Medina because I really need to emphasise this. But Aliseo Medina was the man behind amnesty. Now here's another question for you guys. Any current or former union members here tonight? Okay, come on. Well, here's the question, guys. Which organisation in the United States 25 years ago was leading the charge against illegal immigration? Against. The unions, the AFL-CIO. They had people on the border, folks. They were constantly lobbying Congress to increase penalties on any employer caught employing illegals. Because they saw very logically that illegals were unfair competition for union workers and would drive wages and conditions down and cost jobs. logical. So in 2015, which organisation is leading the charge to legalise the illegals? The unions. So why is the change, people? Why were illegals bad for union workers 25 years ago? Now they're okay. The answer is this. Because 25 years ago, the unions were led by people who had the interests of their members at heart. But after the communists took over in 1995, the agenda changed to promoting socialist revolution. The unions are selling out their own members right now because the revolution comes first, folks. And it took Aliso Medina 5 years of hardcore lobbying inside the AFL-CIO to get them to flip their policy from anti-illegal to pro-illegal, which he achieved at their national convention in Louisiana in 2004-2000. The Marxists did it, folks. But the real question is this: why does he want it? Why did Obama risk so much political capital on a hugely unpopular move? Well, Medina let the cat out of the bag at a big progressive conference in Washington, D.C. 3 years ago. He got up in front of the comrades and said this: passing an immigration bill is the number one priority of the progressive movement. Number one. We have to get citizenship and voting rights for our 11 million undocumented workers. And did he talk about compassion or reuniting families? Not a single word, folks. All he said was this: in 2008, Latinos voted overwhelmingly for Obama and progressive candidates. If we stand by these people and get them citizenship and voting rights, they will stand with our movement. That will give us at least 8 million more Democratic Party votes. That will give us a governing majority, not just for the next few election cycles, but for the foreseeable future. In other words, forever. Mitt Romney lost by 2.5 million votes, folks. How are the Republicans going to counter 8 million more Democratic Party votes? The first thing that happens is that Texas will go blue. And if you take the Electoral College votes from Texas, your second most popular state, add them to the Electoral College votes of California, your most popular state, which they've already got through illegal immigration, do the math, guys. It makes it practically impossible for the Republicans or any Conservative Party to ever elect another president. Ever. One party state. That is why they are doing this, folks. And you have Republicans, people, telling you this is good for the GOP. These are not stupid people telling you this. They can add up numbers. I bet you they can tell you exactly the totals of the checks they got from the Chamber of Commerce. Yet they want to give the Democrats 8 million at least. And I think Obama will open the border even further. 8 million more votes with no plan to counter it other than a little Latino outreach. People, what do you call it? Call people who sell out their own party and their own country for filthy lucre. And you did a great service to your country by getting rid of one of them, folks. So I'll get back on track. I want to do something now. Well, do something now that's normally considered very rude. But I'm a Kiwi, I can go home, right? You don't go to someone else's country and tell them how to do things. But I get asked all the time by Tea Party folks, are we doing the right thing? Should we stick with the GOP? Should we form a third party? Should we just do local issues? Are we making any difference? Are we wasting our time? Should I just play more golf? And I understand that, folks. You've done 5 years of hardcore, thankless work. You've done so much for your country and have got sweet bugger all gratitude for it. Sorry about my crudeness. You understand what it's about, do you not? Well, this is my view, and my only value to you as an outside observer. You have a huge battle coming up. You've got 2016 coming up. And the Republicans have to win that, because if they don't, the Democrats are going to open the borders and flood this country with as many illegal voters as they need to become a permanent majority. They have to win, and if they do that, so basically, they have to win. If they do that, your next president will be either Hillary Clinton or Pocahontas Wine. So there's only one force that can win, but the real question is this. The GOP has to win, but what will the character of that GOP be? Because if the rhinos are allowed to give you, Jim, Common Core is wonderful, illegal immigration is an act of love, Bush, you're going down, folks. Because your base will splinter, the party will fracture, and you will lose. And it may be the last chance you have. But if you have someone different, a real leader, someone who's willing to put up his fists for the Constitution and buck the establishment, put the country first, maybe someone like a Ted Cruz, for instance. But how are you going to get there? That's the issue. I want to go back now, 1976, because I think this history is illustrative of where you are now. 1976, you've been losing your liberties, Republican, Democrat, for decades. The people were pretty darn sick of it, but they had no options. But that year, they finally got a choice. That year, a man came out of California who spoke of a shining city on a hill, and peace through strength, and liberty, and the Constitution. And hundreds of thousands of people, just like you, loved Ronald Reagan's message, folks. And they swarmed into the GOP. They thought they'd be welcome. They thought they would help. And we'd get Ronald Reagan to the nomination and everything would be right. And what did the GOP old guard? How did the GOP old guard treat them, folks? How did the GOP old guard treat Ronald Reagan? They hated him, folks. Not just badly, they sabotaged him, they dirty tricked him, they denigrated him. Ronald Reagan was far too extreme to be elected. Ronald Reagan would be the death of the GOP. Ronald Reagan was banned from Ohio that year by the Ohio State GOP, folks. They hated him and they beat him. They just beat him and they gave the nomination to Gerald Ford. And Gerald Ford went up against Jimmy Carter, and Carter won. How did those Carter years work out, guys? Barrel laughs, were they? Interest rates up to here, gas queues round the corner, gave away the Panama Canal, gutted your military, Iranian hostage crisis. How bad were the Carter years, folks? A lot of people seriously thought that America would never be great again. Seriously, you have to go back to that time, folks. But the really important message is this. The grassroots did not give up. The people like you stayed with the GOP, took over the precinct committee positions, the township committees, the nominating bodies of the party, just like you're doing. And they prepared the way for 1980. When Reagan ran again, this time they were ready, and this time they were not going to take no for an answer. This time they forced the Karl Roves and the John Boehners of the day to give them their candidate. And they got it. They got it, folks. Reagan got the nomination. He went up against Carter and took him out 48 states to 2. Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, that's not too bad for an unelectable candidate, is it? So, the Iranian hostages are back on the first day. The interest rates went down. The taxes went down. He rebuilt your economy. It boomed. He rebuilt your military. He rebuilt the pride in this country. And he took out the Soviets without firing a shot, folks. Any better president in the 20th century? Anyone close? Exactly. So why did you have a Reagan revolution, folks? Because people just like you stuck it to the Karl Roves and the John Boehners of the day, and you decided the candidate. Could there be a lesson for today? Because right now, people, this country is Jimmy Carter on steroids. And you need Ronald Reagan on meth to turn this around. Not just to go where Reagan did, way beyond Reagan. You actually have to gut your federal government and restore your constitution.
Right.
You know that. The time for tinkering is long past.
Right.
But how are you going to get there, folks? Reagan was the great uniter, the great communicator. He could bring those social conservatives, the fiscal conservatives, the defence conservatives all into one camp, bring those Reagan Democrats across. But right now your base is very fractured. You've got 1 million libertarians who gave their vote to Gary Johnson last time. You've got social conservatives, fiscal conservatives, Tea Party Republicans, mainstream Republicans. 4 million GOPers didn't even vote last time. And you've got more than 20 million, some say more than 30 million evangelical Christians who don't even register. With all of the vote fraud out there, folks, the media against you, the unions against you, the dirty tricks, can you afford to lose any element of that base if you're going to win and make that victory worth something? But you may not know this, people, but I've heard on the grapevine that some of these groups don't like each other very much. You heard a bit about that? People, this is the most important election in American history. The most important election in world history. Can we afford this silly bickering? How much responsibility do we bear, folks? But you don't just wave a magic wand and sing Kumbaya and everybody comes together. Because we all have our differing agendas. We're not like the left. We're not a bloc. We're individuals who have our own individual wants and needs and agendas. We will only unify if we have inspiration to do so and incentive. Reagan could do that. He could paint a bold picture. He could paint a vision that inspired people. When have we had inspiration since Reagan, folks? We wonder why our base stays home. The Democrats inspire their base. They have the crappiest message you've ever seen. Basically abortion, poverty, and dependency. And they sell it in terms of hope and change and fairness. Republicans have the greatest message in the world. Freedom, prosperity, liberty. You know, helping the world achieve what we've got. The Constitution. And they sell it in terms of gross national product figures. All those exciting things that turn people on. You know? They always pick the most moderate candidate they can get and wonder why the base stays home.
Exactly.
So this is what I would be doing if I was a man like Ted Cruz. Doesn't have to be him, but I think he's the best place to do this. Most Reagan-esque by far. So I would want to rebuild the Reagan coalition now. And he's talking about that. I'd go to all of these groups and say to them something like this. We need to win the next election. It's crucial. We need to unify, and this is what I'm going to do to bring you together. The first thing I'm going to do is declare, and declare early. Then I'm going to name Alan West on my VP ticket. Yeah. Then for you libertarians, it's going to be Rand Paul, Secretary of the Treasury, and he can do what he damn well wants to the Federal Reserve and the IRS. And Ron can be his assistant. And then for your energy voters, Sarah Palin, Secretary of Energy, Ronald Reagan. in your backyard if you want to. $1 a gallon gas for every American family. Scott Walker, Secretary of Labour. Right to work in every state, people. Mike Lee, Secretary of the Interior. You know, all those federal lands, all those lands the federal government stole off the states, his job would be to give them all back. And then you would have Michelle Buckman, Secretary of Commerce. And it would be deregulate, deregulate, deregulate. OSHA gone, EPA gone. Get American businesses working and producing again. And then it will be Dr. Ben Carson, Secretary of Health and Human Services. And he would restore dignity to your communities and end the welfare culture in this country. Then it has to be John Bolton, Secretary of State. And to be crude, he can give the finger to your enemies and move on the Western Alliance. And then, very important, Ambassador to the United Nations. No one. Trey Gowdy, Attorney General. End the vote fraud once and for all, folks. And for all those millions of Christians who don't care about politics, but they will love Ben Carson, they probably love Sarah, I would say to them, vote for me and your millions. We'll protect your education. We'll protect your homeschooling. We'll get rid of Common Core. We'll make David Barton Secretary of Education. Name your whole cabinet. Run as a team. Would you be inspired by a team like that, folks? And would it unify the base? Because everybody's getting something, right? Everybody's got someone to inspire them and a clear policy direction. And isn't inspiration what we're lacking, folks? Isn't that what gets people up campaigning every day, opening their checkbooks, doing whatever they can? You know, inspiration isn't telling everybody the Democrats are worse. Inspiration is painting a clear vision for saving this country and restoring your Constitution. Because right now, you have a big problem, folks. Every 4 years, the Republicans put up a candidate, and every 4 years, the liberal media rips them to pieces. But what would the media do if Ted Cruz was running with a team of 20 Rottweilers who are all backing each other up and not taking any crap from anyone? Can you imagine running in 2s or 3s across this country, holding mass rallies, talking directly to the people, just as Reagan did? You imagine their movement you could set alight. You imagine the union guys who would vote Republican so that Sarah Palin could get their kids jobs on the energy fields. You imagine the liberal soccer moms who would vote Republican just to get rid of Common Core. Now, there is a precedent for this, folks. Ronald Reagan named his cabinet in '76, but there's an even better precedent. You didn't have a founding father, folks. You had founding fathers. You had George Washington, Samuel Adams, Patrick Henry, James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. You had a whole team to run that revolution, folks. And they had their agendas, they had their egos, but they put them aside for the sake of the country and the good of the revolution. And look at what they gave you, people. Give you amazing things. Imagine what you can do. Look, you've never had a bigger base, folks. You've got a far bigger base than Reagan had. I've been to 43 of the 57 states in this country. I'm still looking for some of them. Everywhere I go, look, 5 years ago, no one was talking about the Constitution. No one was talking about the Bill of Rights, the separation of powers, states' rights. Now, thanks to the Tea Party movement, Mark Levin, Glenn Beck, millions of people are talking about this stuff. You have got the biggest base you've ever had out there. If you can put that base together with leaders like that, who would stand in your way, folks? So, from getting where you are now to having the second Reagan revolution in this country is not that far. So what I'm asking from you people is 2 more years of the hardest political work you have ever done. I know what this cost you, folks. I know the time away from your families. I know the friends that you can lose, but I know the great friends you make in the trenches. I know the money it cost you, the time away from your businesses. I know what it cost you, people, and I'm asking for more of it. Because 2 years of the hardest work you have ever done is going to decide the fate of this country. And not just this country, my country. And not just your children, my children. I can't promise you much, but I can promise you 2 things. If you give it everything you've got for the next 2 years, the very least you are going to earn is the right to look your children in the eye and say, I did everything I possibly could. What is that worth to you? And if you win, and you can win, you can give your children not just the amazing country you inherited, but one even greater. Is that worth fighting for? So I want to say to you folks, thank you so much for what you do for America, for my country, and for liberty, for Israel. God bless America. God bless the Tea Party. God bless the GOP. Thank you all.